Now part 8 is putting the servo in. You have to put the arms through the chassis and then fit with 4 screws. Again, you don't have to use any wax because this is going into that soft plastic. But take your servo and your chassis and sort of drop it in the arms, and you have to tip it a bit so they come out like so, and then push the servo forwards and down. You can see that. I better take it back a bit. There's sort of a mounting area. It's very hard to see on there, and it just literally, let's get it right, just drops down into place, and the servo sits angled, and then it's a case of these holes each side, dropping a screw in, I kind of like this servo design, or the mounting design, because it actually, the screws are pulling the chassis together again in a different area. So that is a clever design. Like I said, don't go too mad, but that is one of the most, it's solid. You know, when you have the little posts like on the lunch boxes and all that, eventually if they get too bad, I buy metal ones because they work loose and they don't keep tight, and then you can put machine screws in with the thread lock, and then they stay nicely. But this design I think is a lot better because it's just not going to come loose. But they also give you an access hole to tighten up underneath, which is clever if required. But like I said, I've used a little bit of thread lock, so we're not going to have to worry too much about that. Now stage 9 is the front wishbones, which are D1s. There's a C2, which is a grey plastic, and there's a BA14 U pin. Now these are universal, so there's not a wrong way or on them, but this part you've got to have it, the hook bits at the front will say, with the countersunk looking parts above, and then with the wishbones you want the straight section to the rear here, and then it's a case of just slide this in. That was quite fiddly. Well, that concludes stage 9. Now we're on to attaching the wishbones with the front bumper, which is M7, with the 15mm self tappers again. We're going into the chassis, so wax is required, and so we'll do that bit next. Let's see. You can take this part and just lay it on like so. The bumper will go on top of that, and the bit of the bumper actually has the piece that captures the pin. You might have to pull the pin back out a bit, so you don't want the pin too far through. I think we're there. It's quite fiddly. It'll be better once we've got a screw in. We've got the pin in the place. That was the problem. You've got to bring it forwards a bit to go in that little gap there. There we go. Let's push that in there. That's the wishbones now fitted, and concludes part 10. Now stage 11 is fitting the upper front wishbones, and we've got 2 screws which goes through there on those upright bits. The wishbones are almost symmetrical, but they're not, but they've got little guide arrows to say pointing towards the front, which makes it really easy for everyone. So if we go on there, you can just about see that little arrow. So again, it doesn't matter which way up, they're symmetrical otherwise, side to side. So put it on the front, slide the pin in. That's one done. Again, arrow to the front, pin goes in, and that is stage 11 completed. Now stage 12 is the upright, what is it, caster block and axle. These have got a little thingy on the top. Can you see that? So you guess that goes upwards, and basically you do one direction, one the other. It's simple as that. Slide a screw pin in and wind it up. So we have one, don't we? Correct? Yep. Because it shows ball joint up, pin up. So the other side, we just got to do the opposite. Make sure that piece is on top upwards. Slide the pin in. And that completes part 12. Now stage 13 is putting the front hubs on with 4 pin screws, and you just put them whichever one with the ball facing upwards for that side facing backwards, like so. So we know that was the one we was just looking at. Slide it in the top, screw in, down to the bottom, do the same. There we go, that's one side done, and repeat for the other. Exactly the same. I was thinking to myself while I was doing this, against the old DT01 I've done recently, there's a lot more stages to complete bag A than on the DT01 chassis. Admittedly, don't put the servo in as early, but the rest of the suspension and all that is way more complex, being double wishbone, and I kind of like this sort of chunky double wishbone on these. I know a lot of people change them over to other types, like with the tie rods, but I just like the chunkiness. But that concludes part 13 and bag A. Now, starting bag B, we're on part 14 and it's building the diff. The only difference I'm doing is I'm using anti-wear grease again. It's Shen's favourite thing. I must have an open one. This is a brand new pot. Let's have a look. Yeah. Thought I had an open one. And it's just to make the diff a bit stiffer, where this is sort of two-wheel drive. So I'm going to smear some on this one. And drop that in. And then the hard bit is getting it onto the teeth, because I didn't want to do it before, because this stuff is really messy at the best of times. If you can see, I'm spreading it inside. There we go, that's coated. And then we'll do these centre gears. And I'm going to put some grease on each one. And hopefully I get everything. Then I'm going to turn these 90 degrees so the grease is to one side, so there'll be grease on the next sections of the next one, if that makes sense. And drop that into the diff. And yes, I'm getting messy. And then we'll put grease on this top one and just lay that on. And what I like to do is, before I put the screws in, I like to take the diff cups and lay them on, just to spread the grease and line it up a little bit before I drop the cover on. And I like to sort of give them a twiddle as I tighten the screws up. But those screws are not going to do nothing much. as I've put it in the wrong place. That's better. Yeah, putting these in and twiddling it as you screw it, you make sure the gears are nicely lined up, because they can actually go a little bit off. If that sounds possible, especially when you're doing this. And I've just moved it all again. But you can hear the resistance from the grease. Because it might sound silly, you can actually put these gears in and get them off centre, but those are well lined up, and that concludes stage 14. Now stage 15 is the first half of the gearbox, which is the A1, 2 bearings and a gear and 1 shaft. So just a slight smear of grease on this. The way I do it is I slip the bearing on and just push it in the hole like so, and then I grease the first part of the gear up well. Plenty of grease on. Most of it will squeeze out, but I just like to go over the top and then put that in, and then just to smear it round, and just does it like so. Just a slight smear on top as we drop in the bearing, and that's what you end up with, like that. And that concludes part 15.